Back in the early 60s when I was in high school, it was the middle of the Cold War. And I remember hearing about people who were building bomb shelters in their backyard. But did you know that at the beginning of World War II, people also built bomb shelters because they were just sure the Japanese were going to attack here at any moment? Now, what does all that have to do about me standing here at the Brea Gateway Shopping Center? Well, let me tell you. Do you have any idea what happened to those shelters? Well, I know what happened to one of them. They built this parking lot on top of it, and I could be standing over the shelter right now. Back in 1942, 2 months after Pearl Harbor, there was an article in the Brea Progress with the headline, "Tremaine Builds War Shelter." And just who was this Tremaine guy? That's a whole story into itself. Ever since he was a young man, he was one of those people who always seemed to be where the action was, or he created that action for himself. Besides owning a stagecoach line and a gold mine before he came to Brea in 1918, he'd also been a famous race car driver nicknamed Wild Bill, who drove in several contests through the desert between Phoenix and Los Angeles. Beginning in the late teens, he owned a garage on Brea Boulevard. And in that garage, in December 1925, he teamed with a young Austrian plane designer, Fred Theheld, to build the Hummingbird, the first low-winged monoplane in the United States. In that garage in 1927, he and Theheld built a larger plane that was supposed to fly to Hawaii in the Big Dole Air Race. Besides all those things he'd been involved in, he was also Brea's first town constable. When World War II broke out, he and his wife Hannah were living in a small home on Madrona Avenue. And Madrona went through here just about where I'm standing. And it was behind that home that he built the bomb shelter. And how did he do it? Well, he dug a big hole, 7 feet deep, 6 feet wide, and 10 feet long. And for a ceiling, he took a big tank, cut it in half. He placed the two halves on the top. It kind of looked like an arch for the ceiling. He also built some steps going down into it. He put some shelves in there. He covered the whole thing with 2 feet of dirt. And it said in the article that he was going to use the shelter to smoke deer meat because he was a big hunter. I guess I don't need to tell you, Bill and his wife never used the shelter for the reason it was built. In fact, they probably never used it for much of anything, because 7 months after building it, they moved away to Yucaipa, where Bill died in 1951. But what a life he'd lived. Remember at the beginning I was telling you about Cold War bomb shelters? Well, I have a surprise for you. One of them still exists here in Brea, and it's not that far away from here. So why don't we go over there now, and let's take a trip back in time. I'm standing here in front of a house in one of those post-World War II housing tracts south of Imperial Highway. And I found out about this shelter years ago when I was going through some old newspapers down at the Historical Society, and I was turning the pages, and all of a sudden I came across this picture of a Mr. Withey. And Mr. Withey's wife worked at Air Vista School. And in the picture, Mr. Withey was coming out of the bomb shelter, and it said that he had built it. And I got to thinking, I wonder if this bomb shelter still exists. So I built up my courage. I got in my car, I came over here, I knocked at the front door, and when the lady came, I said, you know, this is really going to sound like a strange question, but by chance, do you have a bomb shelter in your backyard? And she said, yes, we do. So I didn't get to see the shelter then, but we're going to go down into it right now. So why don't we go back there and see it? Well, here it is. Here's the entrance. And this evidently was some sort of antenna that was attached to a radio or a transmitter, so the people down in the shelter had access to the radio waves. And these, I assume, were air vents. So why don't we go down in the shelter now? Now this looks really heavy. I know it's a steel door, and I have no idea how much it weighs, so I'm going to try lifting. Oh, this is really heavy. Oh, yeah, it's real heavy. So let me try walking down here now. These steps look very rusty, like a lot of water has seeped in here over the years. And it looks like those steps down there aren't steel either. They look like they may be wood. Now in the article, before I go any further, in the article it said if I go down these steps and I turn to my right, what I'm going to see in front of me is going to be like a cot attached to the bed, and above that cot is a seascape, a painting. So we're going to go down there and see how much of that stuff still exists after 40 years. Looks like a lot of spider webs down here too, and I'm not a real big fan of spiders. Yeah, a lot of spiders. Oh my gosh, look over there. There's that bed, or the couch, or whatever it is, attached to the wall, And the amazing thing, look above it. Look what's still hanging there after 40 years. The painting of the seascape. It looks like something off of Carmel or Big Sur. And I see some interesting little other things in here. Why don't you come in a little bit closer? Ah, look over here. This must be the bathroom. In the article, it talked about a chemical toilet. And there it is in there. And there's the paper here. I don't know what that is. Colon, I don't know. Let's see. It's the directions how to use the toilet. It must have fallen off the wall over here. And there's a spider web hanging there. Now let me look around here, see if there's anything else to show you. I think I know what this is over here. In the article, it said that there was a do-it-yourself air supply, and you had to turn this thing for 1 minute to get an hour's worth of air. And this looks like a handle here. It looks like something I can turn. So let me try. It's turning. So let me give it a good turn. And what do you know? There's air coming out. Hey, this is great. It said in the article, too, the bad thing about this was that if somebody had to stay awake at all times, because if somebody fell asleep and there was nobody around here to do this, everybody inside would probably die. And let me see, anything else? This thing sticking down here, I think, is the rest of that antenna. So maybe the person would put a radio over here, would have a cord or something to another part of the room. But this evidently was the antenna. So anything else to see in here? It's pretty small, so I think I've seen it all. So I hope you enjoyed our tour, going back in time to 1961. And for this Did You Know segment of Video Braille Line, I'm Brian Saul from 10 Feet Under the Ground.